Um, so it was more to control emotions. It's a surprise for everybody, except maybe to me.
Carlos is practicing again, yet the room still feels unsettled. Glue on the wrist. Sinner at the top. Ferrero wounded. The shortest possible defense from Carlos Sr. That is the opening behind Ferrero. Finally exposes why Alcaraz is not trusting his father again after this injury. The easy story says a wrist injury simply paused a champion. Serious fans know better. This injury arrived after the coach who built Carlos into a six-slam monster left under contract tension, public silence, and one sentence that aged badly. I wish I could have continued. That line is not proof. It is evidence of a gap. Ferrero sounded like the man outside the door, watching a team he once controlled handle the most delicate stretch of Alcaraz's career. Then came the withdrawal post, and social media did the rest. The Joy brand suddenly looked fragile. Sinner's calm climb made Carlos's absence feel louder. Every recovery clip turned into an audit of who is guiding him now. Nothing confirms the father question. Silence makes it impossible to ignore any more inside tennis circles right now. Tell me your first reaction. Protection, politics, or panic? Now we follow the timeline without pretending the silence is harmless. It all begins with the post that made every comfortable explanation look thin. Alcaraz did not write like a man trying to feed drama. He wrote like an athlete making a medical decision he hated. His recovery was improving, he felt better, yet Queens and Wimbledon were gone. For most players, that would be enough. Wrist injury, rest, comeback. With Carlos, the reaction became different because the tennis world had already watched the old authority around him disappear. May 19th mattered because it turned a private team split into a public audit. The player who made grass feel like a playground was missing from the surface where his smile had become a weapon. Wimbledon without Alcaraz did not feel like a draw adjustment. It felt like a missing chapter from the new era of men's tennis. Sinner became the other half of the picture immediately. He only needed to remain available, healthy enough to compete, and positioned above Carlos in rankings. That is the coldest kind of pressure. A rival does not have to attack you when your own body has already removed you from the calendar. Sinner's game carries that quiet laboratory feel, all clean contact and narrow emotional leakage. Alcaraz is the opposite. He turns improvisation into theater. He makes danger look like fun. When that player disappears, his absence has sound. The wrist also attacked the exact part of Carlos that made him Carlos. This was not a hamstring that limited one chase or a shoulder that softened one serve. The right wrist sits inside the forehand whip, the touch drop shot, the rushed passing shot, the reflex volley, the late flick from impossible positions. Alcaraz's joy is physical. It lives in the last-second change of idea. Take away trust in the wrist, and joy becomes calculation. That is why the recovery clips were never just recovery clips. Fans treated soft forehands, practice clips, and delayed serving talk as clues rather than routine rehab material. Patrick Mouratoglou's comments added another layer because they sounded both optimistic and cautious. He believed Carlos could hit normally from the baseline soon, while serving would likely need more patience because the wrist has to be solid. That distinction mattered. Baseline hitting lets a player look alive again. Serving tells the truth. The serve is where rhythm, extension, grip, and violence meet. If the serve is delayed, the comeback is not just about movement. It is about whether the most marketable player in tennis can trust the joint that sells his entire style. That word, trust, keeps the father angle alive. Such wording sounds harsh, and no clean source confirms that Carlos has stopped trusting his father. Serious fans should say that plainly. The claim alone is not the danger. Its real power is how easily the claim attaches itself to the timeline. Ferrero leaves. The father gives a guarded response. The team changes shape. Carlos gets injured. The injury stretches from clay into grass. Sinner benefits. Social media looks at all of that and decides there is smoke because the room has never been cleared. Ferrero's position in this story is unusual because he does not need to behave like an enemy to become the most powerful witness. He helped build the champion. Under him, Carlos won 6 majors and 24 tour-level trophies. That record removes the easy insult. Nobody can paint Ferrero as a bitter outsider who never understood the player. He knew the habits, the competitive addiction, and the way Carlos could turn a normal rally into a dare. He was more than a voice in the box, the adult who had been there before the machine arrived around Carlos. That is why his line cut so deep. "I wish I could have continued" was polite enough for public consumption, yet it carried the weight of someone not fully finished. He kept the bridge standing, avoided family accusation, and never made a camera-ready charge about control. The line worked because it was restrained. In tennis, restraint often creates more suspicion than anger. A shouting coach gives the audience something to dismiss. A wounded coach who chooses careful words gives the audience something to replay. Details around the split gave the story teeth. A new contract, a short window, disagreement over non-sporting clauses, and friction about the professional direction around Alcaraz. Ferrero later pushed back against the money explanation, which mattered because money would have made the story smaller. A fee dispute is ordinary. Clauses about control are different. Those bring the father, the academy, the schedule, and the business circle into the same conversation. Suddenly, the break was not just about who stands in the box, it was about who gets to shape the world around Carlos. Carlos Sr. answered with one sentence that solved nothing. "Each person," he said, "is free to give an opinion based on what they know." That response was neither confession nor explanation. For a family that has every reason to protect Carlos, silence can be responsible. For fans watching a superstar drift from a legendary coach into a serious injury layoff, silence looks strategic. The same sentence can sound dignified to one side and evasive to the other. That is why the father question survived. The social media turn came when the withdrawal post met the old Ferrero comments. On its own, the post was a medical update. Inside the larger timeline, it became a document. Fans did what they always do during uncertainty. They connected dates, tones, unfollows, interviews, photographs, training clips, and rankings. The Ferrero Instagram distance fed the story because people could see it without interpretation. When a former coach who still speaks warmly about Carlos creates distance online, the audience reads pain into the gap. Maybe that reading is unfair. It still changed the plot. The clean version remains simple. Ferrero has not exposed a proven betrayal by Carlos's father. Carlos has not publicly declared distrust. No medical source has blamed family politics for the wrist. The injury happened on court, and the team chose caution by pulling him from major events. Those facts are firm. The story becomes dangerous only when those facts sit beside the emotional record. A coach who wanted to continue is gone. A father who had influence stayed guarded. A player whose instinct is to play with joy now has to obey limits. A rival whose brand is control keeps moving. That is the engine. Alcaraz is not built like Sinner, and the contrast makes the crisis bigger. Sinner can look like he lives inside repetition. He looks like a player who would hit the same ball for 3 hours if the data demanded it. Carlos needs expression. He needs the crowd pulse, the impossible option, the sprint that should be late but arrives on time. His greatness has always seemed tied to permission. Permission to improvise, risk, and feel more alive than the scoreboard. Ferrero's genius was not removing that joy. His genius was putting borders around it. Without Ferrero, every border gets questioned. Samuel Lopez is a respected coach, and the team is not empty. The medical staff, fitness team, family structure, and management group are still there. This is not a lonely player walking into chaos. Still, Ferrero was the symbolic break. His history let him challenge Carlos without sounding like a hired voice, and that history gave him the right to make the champion uncomfortable. When an athlete becomes a brand, the circle can begin managing the glow instead of protecting the person. That is the fear behind the title. The brand part matters because Alcaraz is no longer just a tennis player. He is a Nike kit, a Babolat frame, a Rolex image, a global ambassador for a version of tennis that looks young, happy, expensive, and fearless. His smile sells. His shot-making is a marketing department's dream. Victory lets every sponsor sell freshness. A wrist injury turns that same image fragile. That does not mean brands control the comeback. It means the pressure around the comeback is larger than a practice schedule. That commercial layer sharpens the suspicion because celebrity creates insulation. Around a normal player, one firm medical decision stays private. Around Carlos, the same decision passes through agents, schedules, broadcasters, sponsors, tournament expectations, family plans, and the fan economy that feeds on access. Nobody needs to behave badly for the pressure to become real. The machine can push even when every individual inside it believes they are helping. That is the danger of superstardom at scale. Pressure can wear a friendly face and still change the athlete's choices. A normal player can return quietly. Carlos returns inside a spotlight. The camera does not only ask whether he can hit, it checks the aura, the forehand crack, the drop shot disrespect, and whether the boyish energy still looks natural after caution. Every video becomes a public test that invites private questions about drill approval, serve timing, and the line between healthy caution and fear. The doubt travels fast. That is where the father issue becomes a narrative weapon. A father in tennis is never just a father once the player becomes a corporation. He can be protector, memory keeper, business voice, emotional anchor, and pressure point at the same time in modern tennis. Carlos Sr. has been part of the tennis life from the beginning. That makes him important. It also makes him impossible to discuss cleanly. Fans can respect family loyalty and still wonder whether family loyalty is the best structure for every professional decision. Ferrero carried different authority. Blood, childhood sponsorship, and surname had nothing to do with it. His standing came from being a former world number one, a Roland Garros champion, a man who had lived the grind and recognized something enormous in a 15-year-old from Murcia. That authority is hard to replace. When Ferrero said he still thought about Carlos every day after the split, the line sounded less like gossip and more like a man trying to detach from a project that had become personal. That is why the Sinner shadow keeps sharpening the story. Sinner is not the villain because he competes well. He becomes the pressure because he represents the cost of delay. Every week Carlos spends testing the wrist, Sinner owns more of the conversation. Every Grand Slam without Carlos removes the rivalry from the court and hands it to rankings, pundits, and fan arguments. The established king is wounded. The hungry challenger does not need a speech. The draw itself becomes his speech. For Alcaraz fans, this is the uncomfortable part. The injury did not only pause Carlos's season, it gave the tennis world time to rethink the December decision. At the moment of the split, many fans tried to be mature. Great partnerships end. Players grow up. Coaches need new chapters. Families choose different plans. After the wrist, that explanation feels less satisfying. Ferrero's absence now has consequences in the imagination, even if nobody can prove it changed the medical outcome. That is how sports narratives work. The scoreboard gives numbers. Timing gives meaning. The most honest reading is that Ferrero exposed a structure, not a scandal. His comments showed that the breakup was not as clean as the farewell posts made it sound. Disagreements apparently went beyond tennis strokes. The record included an environment making decisions, a player who said he knew what was happening, and a coach who stepped back because the terms no longer matched what he could accept. None of that proves Carlos distrusts his father. It explains why people ask whether he trusts the same circle to manage the most sensitive injury of his career. The injury then turned that question from gossip into stakes. A wrist comeback punishes impatience, especially when a young champion feels invincible before the body agrees. Team caution can drain momentum, while aggression can risk damage. The decision is not simple. That is why the missing Ferrero voice feels so loud. A coach who balanced joy and discipline would have been valuable here. The audience can sense that without needing a leaked argument. Carlos's own identity makes the tension more painful. He has always sold tennis as celebration. Even his serious matches carry mischief. He plays like someone who enjoys proving geometry wrong. That identity made him beloved, but it also created a problem. Joyful players can make risk look harmless. When Carlos sprints into a corner and whips a winner from nowhere, fans see genius. A coach sees load, timing, strain, repeat cost, and the quiet price of miracle tennis. Ferrero understood that gap between entertainment and survival. So when the title says Ferrero finally exposes why Alcaraz is not trusting his father again after this injury, the real answer is not a hidden confession. It is the discomfort created by the order of events. Ferrero's exit exposed how many decisions sit around Carlos. The father's guarded answer revealed how little the public is allowed to know. The wrist made every decision expensive. Sinner's rise showed how quickly the sport moves when one superstar hesitates, and social media displayed the instinct to seek a human cause behind a physical problem. That instinct may be unfair, not random. Tennis has seen family teams become both shelters and traps. It has seen prodigies protected by parents, pushed by parents, rescued by outside coaches, and damaged by unclear authority. Carlos does not have to fit any extreme example for fans to recognize the pattern. When a champion reaches the point where his career is also a business empire, the hardest question becomes brutally simple: who is allowed to say no? Ferrero looked like one of the few people who could. That is the line the whole story turns on. Not whether Carlos loves his father, whether Carlos Sr. is the villain, or whether Samuel Lopez lacks knowledge. The issue is authority. Stopping the joy machine requires someone strong enough to call a missed Wimbledon painful, a ruined wrist worse, and an angry champion still too early for battle. The answer once included Ferrero. Now the answer is less visible. That invisibility makes fans restless. It also makes every statement from the team feel incomplete. Recovery is going well sounds positive, but it does not tell viewers who is setting the red lines. Feeling much better sounds hopeful, but it does not tell anyone how the wrist reacts under match pressure. Not ready to compete sounds responsible, but it also confirms that the problem outlasted the early optimism. Sinner's presence turns responsibility into urgency. He keeps moving, Djokovic remains dangerous, the ranking system processes absences, and Wimbledon continues without sentiment. Tennis is polite in press rooms and ruthless in calendars. That is why the injury lands like a political story inside a sporting one. A private wrist problem changes seedings, sponsorship tone, rivalry momentum, media attention, and the emotional balance of the fan base. One joint in Carlos's right hand alters the entire men's tour. There is a final truth that makes the headline work without needing to fake the facts. Ferrero did not have to expose Carlos's father directly. His absence did the exposing. The coach who built the champion is gone, so the people still around him become more visible. Limited explanation around the breakup invites suspicion during later crises. A wrist injury that threatens the player's signature style can turn that suspicion into obsession. The room still feels unsettled even with Carlos practicing again. A comeback clip can show contact without revealing trust. Smiling tells viewers something about mood, not authority. A clean forehand in practice can reassure the casual viewer, while serious tennis fans wait for tight scores, violent serves, and that old instinct telling Carlos to turn danger into magic. For a player built on confidence, public caution can feel almost as revealing as pain, because fans read limits as hints about private doubt inside the camp. Maybe Alcaraz trusts his father completely, the team handled the injury with perfect caution, and Ferrero's split connects to the wrist only through timing and public imagination. Those may be the fairest conclusions. Fans hesitate because elite tennis rarely collapses from one clean cause. It usually bends through small decisions, guarded conversations, missed warnings, and pressure that looks normal until the body sends a message nobody can spin. The story is not that Ferrero revealed a family betrayal. The stronger story is that his wounded exit revealed a question Carlos's camp still has not answered in a way fans can feel. Who controls the most valuable young body in tennis when joy, business, family, rivalry, and fear all want to vote? Until Alcaraz returns, serves freely, survives pressure, and looks like himself against the players who have been waiting, that question will stay alive. If he comes back strong, the father angle will lose oxygen. If the wrist responds badly, Ferrero's old line will be dragged back into every comment section like a warning that nobody wanted to read in time. That is the brutal part. Carlos Alcaraz built his image around trust. The shot, the smile, the team, and the closest people all fed that impression. The injury has not destroyed that image. It has made fans inspect it. Ferrero's name remains attached because he was the last great symbol of discipline before the uncertainty began. Sinner remains attached because he is the rival turning absence into opportunity. The next chapter belongs to Carlos's wrist and the people around it. The tennis world will watch the first full serve, the first long match, the first tight comeback game, and the first moment when Carlos has to decide whether to protect himself or chase the old magic. That moment will tell us more than any guarded interview. Drop your take below if Ferrero's exit looks different after this injury. Push back if the father question feels exaggerated. I want your side. Subscribe for more tennis stories where the headline starts the fight, but the facts decide where it ends.